This part of Dartmoor, at the confluence of the East and the West Dart rivers, is probably one of the best well-known and iconic parts of the moor. It is a place that always tends to be busy, but particularly on bank holiday weekends. Looking at the scenery around us, I can totally understand why it is so popular. It's quite beautiful. There are numerous walks, starting and finishing at Badger's Holt. Today's walk is just one of them, but it is one of my favourites. In a valley surrounded by tors and open moorland, many of the walks starting here initially head in an upward direction. Our walk today takes us up towards, but just below Yartor. We're heading for Sherwell or Sherrill, where we join the Western Two Moors Way. We then continue to and across Cater Common before turning and heading for Piswell. It's then on to Belliver for lunch by the East Dart, through Belliver Forest, past Laughter Hole Farm and onto the open moor before entering Little Newtake Plantation and continuing to Brimp's Farm. Then we head for Huckerby before turning back towards Dartmeet. And film at the same time is going to be slightly difficult, I think. A moorland, river and forest walk, a bit of everything, with a distance of approximately 10 miles. The actual path below Yartor is not where it's shown on the map, but a lot higher and initially quite difficult to find. A mixture of animal tracks and walking paths, until you get about halfway to Sherwell, where the track becomes more definite. Another breathtaking view. Across the East Dart and on the far side of the valley is Brimp's Farm, which we'll visit on our return journey. Up above us is Yartor, a quite spectacular tor with some exceptional views. And when I say exceptional, I mean exceptional. Well worth the effort to get there, particularly in these conditions. From there we can see Babony, which is an alternative route to the East Dart, the Stepping Stones and Laughter Hole House. The path now continues in a downward direction towards a gate and stile. Once over the stile, we'd head for Sherwell, or Sherrill as it's pronounced. Across the field and Sherrill comes into view. We'll be there shortly, but first there is a stream and quite boggy field to cross. The areas on each side of this bridge have been pretty well churned up, either by animals or of course by walkers. But the worst is yet to come, as Bob finds out as he crosses quite a boggy area. Oops! He sunk up to his calf in bog and mud, but no ill effects. It's quite a high stile, and the dogs struggle a little bit to get over it. Mind you, if I'm really honest, so do some of our walkers. It does, however, give the rest of us a chance to have a short break. It's here we join the western route of the Two Moors Way. Initially a broad stony pathway, which is easy to follow but quite churned up by animals in places. As we're on the Two Moors Way, for those who don't know, this is part of a long-distance walking route between Ivybridge on the southern edge of Dartmoor to Lynmouth on the north coast of Exmoor, 102 miles. The part we're on at present is the western route, which we'll stay on until we turn off to Piswell on Cater Common. We're going to leave the open moor in a short while and continue along a lane. But before we do that, it's perhaps a good idea to have a coffee break. Relaxing on our break, and there's a little more time to take in the scenery around us, the farms and other countryside features. Even though we're still on the Two Moors Way, for the next half mile or so, there is some road walking. But it's not that bad, and with such fine weather, there's still plenty to see. We'll shortly be turning off onto Cater Common, just after these trees in front of us. Many years ago, trees of this type were planted to provide shelter and windbreaks. They are now an eye-catching part of the landscape. Cater Common can be exceptionally boggy and waterlogged, and on a bad weather day it's terrible, but today is fine, even though there are a fair amount of cattle and sheep grazing which have churned up the ground, but thankfully not too badly. At this point, the recognisable pathway has been fenced off, and it's not clear why this has been done, but it does force us to make an alternative route around this fencing. Here we have a very solid and no doubt expensive gate and pillars, which doesn't seem to achieve anything. Perhaps it's not finished yet. It's now time to leave the Two Moors Way and head for Piswell. It isn't far to this small community, and I know there is a ford there that we have to cross. I just hope the recent rain hasn't made it too difficult.
Nice to go.
The ford at Piswell is now in front of us, and the water levels seem reasonably good and easy to cross. As far as fords go, this one is not very deep at all, but nevertheless some of our walkers are a little apprehensive about crossing the stepping stones.
Sorry about that, Laurie, I know you hate those things.
The old farmhouse at Piswell is a Grade 2 listed building, but I'm not sure whether the list aspect applies to just one building or all of them. One of the buildings features a 16th century door and fireplace. The present day use includes a fencing company, hence the fence posts. This is the path to Postbridge, and it's necessary to turn off it and head for Belliver, which is well signposted, if not initially a little muddy underfoot. The farm track comes to an end, and we have to cross an open field to link with the continuing pathway.
I'm trying to work out which way we're going.
Well, we're going diagonally across the field.
This track has been quite heftily gouged out by a farm tractor, and in wet conditions can be very muddy. Once more we've got quite a high stile, which again is difficult for the dogs to climb, but with a little help they're soon over it. Belliver is surprisingly close, and there is a couple of routes we could follow, either down the road to Jury Farm and follow the path at that point, or across the gorse-covered hillside to link with the road approach to Belliver further up that road. We chose the latter. I came back to this area. The bluebells have now come with a vengeance. Skylarks are now in abundance and in the middle of their breeding season.
Belliver Bridge and the East Start. We're going to go into the woods on the other side of the river and have some lunch.
Belliver is another very popular area and a great place to have our lunch, if we can find somewhere to sit down, that is. The hamlet of Belliver is situated just a short distance from the river. The first mention of the settlement is in the Duchy of Cornwall record from 1355, which gave the name of the farm here as Wellford. Wheel means spring and ford. To add to the confusion, Eric Hemery, a Dartmoor writer, proposed that the name came from Bal, meaning mine, and ford, i.e. the mine by the ford. The Devonshire dialect changed the name to Belliver. Until after World War II, the hamlet consisted of Belliver Farm and its outbuildings, with a small number of cottages for the workers. They introduced the Galloways and Aberdeen Angus cattle onto Dartmoor. Eventually we found a place to have our lunch. It's time to relax for a short while and take in the activity around us. It's surprising what some of the visitors bring. Almost the kitchen sink scenario. Barbecues, tables, chairs, and mountains of food. Bellever Forest was planted by the Duchy of Cornwall in the 1920s to replenish wood supplies. Unfortunately, the area has a number of prehistoric settlements dating back to the Bronze Age, which seem to have been overlooked during the forestation. This, together with the use of convenient sources of stone for building walls and roads, has further diminished the site.
You don't get very many days like today with the clarity of the air, so you can see for absolute miles. It's brilliant. We're so lucky.
Laughter Hole Farm, and as far as I can tell, it's no longer being actively used, although there is a residential building close to the farm which seems to be still in use. This tree is rather weird. It is full of what looks like hanging lichen or lichen. I've never seen this before. The tree must be permanently in a shady and damp area. From Laughter Hole Farm, it's just a short distance to a gate that takes us out of the forest and onto the open moor.
Fantastic.
Note the number of field systems and hut circles shown on the map. This whole area had a number of settlements dating back to the Bronze Age. We have a full 360 degrees of moorland all round us. Quite a view. Looking back, we can now see Laughter Tor.
No, you're right there, mate.
We aren't on the open moor for very long and are making our way towards Little Newtake Plantation. Several tracks or routes across the moor are shown in the Ordnance Survey map, but these seem to vary considerably and not all the pathways are obvious. This is an area where having a GPS helps considerably. A farm gate in an enclosing wall gives us access to the Little Newtake Plantation. But inside the confines of the plantation, there is a new barn-type building being constructed, and the excavation material has been put basically anywhere they can find a space, which includes over part of the pathway through the plantation. Not a lot we can do about it, except work our way around it.
They've really messed it up, haven't they?
There doesn't seem to be a public right-of-way through the plantation, and if privately owned, no real obligation to maintain the route for walkers. On the Ordnance Survey map, there's certainly no official designated path through the plantation, only dotted pathways, which under normal circumstances are easy to follow and can be used. However, there is a designated pathway through the plantation starting near Laughter Hole Farm, following the East Dart. But unfortunately, in parts it's so boggy, it's virtually impassable. This alternative route we're taking today is much more acceptable.
I'm not sure.
The remainder of the route through the plantation is good, although the number of trees felled by the winter gales is extensive. This broad pathway gives us the ability to look at the area we visited in the morning, towards the Two Moors Way, Sherrill,
Not so
and
long
indeed
ago,
Yartor.
In fact, this morning we were over that side.
We're now turning
In
off
a
the
complete
pathway
circle.
and heading for Brimp's farm via a gate leading from the plantation. It's fairly high up in the hedge, and the first few of our walkers went straight past it and had to come back. Our route now takes us across the field and down a pathway. From here there's a clear view of the East Dart just before Dartmeet. And of course Yartor again, which dominates the skyline above us. From our walker's point of view, it's time to have a drink stop. Out of the wind, the sun is really warm.
Still got no strength to wave, have we?
This is now the last stage of our walk, starting with Brimp's farm, which whilst being a farm, offers bed and breakfast accommodation with extensive camping areas and cream teas. A very diverse business. One of our walkers is leaving us at this point and making their own way back to Dartmeet.
Okay,
For us, we're heading for Huckabee, which will avoid going down the main road to Badger's Halt, which is likely to be very busy on a bank holiday. This relatively short detour is about an extra 3/4 of a mile. An added bonus, a motorbike cavalcade, not something you often see on a Dartmoor walk. From motorbikes to flowers, the fast lane to the Purslane. Aren't they just fantastic?
Ditch walk.
We quite quickly turn off the road to Huckabee and make our way first down a muddy track, through a gate, then across open fields, before descending down a further track, heading back towards Dartmeet. The going underfoot deteriorates rapidly, and down this fairly narrow lane becomes very difficult.
Quite a muddy area.
Eventually the track opens up into a field, then it just becomes very muddy. But this is walking. Well, we've just about come full circle and will shortly be back to Badger's Holt. All of us today seem to have really enjoyed it, and for those watching, I hope it gives you the enthusiasm to do the walk yourselves.